Hey friends, welcome back to Magic Like This, a C.S. Lewis book club podcast. I'm your host, Christina Wallace. I'm a theology student at Oxford University, which is like the hub of Lewis nerdydom. Is nerdydom a word? Nerddom? We'll go with nerddom. That doesn't feel like a word either. Certainly not a word befitting someone who's claiming to study at Oxford, but we're just going to roll with it. It's fine. I'm also a creative writer, and I teach creative writing courses to Christians who have felt like God's called them into that creative space and has called them to write in a more public-facing way. And I am just a huge Lewis fan, and I love talking to people about C.S. Lewis. And right now we're in the Screwtape letters, and we're doing one letter at a time, and we're looking at letter 26 today. And I'm joined by my buddy Thornton of the Mere C.S. Lewis podcast to chat about letter 26, and it's been super fun chatting with him. I gave Thornton a list of different letters that we could look at together, and immediately he was like, letter 26 maybe didn't save my marriage, but really helped. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do that letter then, right? Yes. And so it was so fun to have Thornton join me from the US to chat about letter 26 of Screwtape and how it has had a personal impact on his life. Really, really enjoyed it. We also got on a side tangent about our dogs and God's love for all creation that I was considering editing out because it's not really relevant to this particular letter, but also it's really beautiful. And it's still true. So I'm going to leave it in. And I hope that those of you who own dogs will probably especially enjoy it. But even if you don't, I hope you enjoy it anyway. And also, I just want to throw it out. You can find Thornton over on his podcast, which I'm actually a guest on his podcast as well. And we chat about The Last Battle, which is the final book in the Narnia series. And you can find him at Mere C.S. Lewis. He's on all the major podcasting platforms, and I'll put a link in the show notes where you can find him. But yeah, it was just super fun to chat with Thornton. He was one of the first people who ever reached out to me when I started Magic Like This a couple of years ago. He was like the first connection that I made through this podcast. And so it was such a gift to be able to have him on. And I really hope that you enjoy this conversation that we have about letter 26 of Screwtape Letters. Thornton, thank you so much for joining me for discussing letter 26 of Screwtape Letters.
Well, thank you so much, Christina, for having me on. As I love this letter, and it's the most impactful letter of my life out of all of the Screwtape letters. So I am stoked to be talking about it.
Wow, that's high praise. I'm glad that you're the one that I got on for this letter. That's amazing. Before we dive in, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to C.S. Lewis? I would love for people to know where they can find your podcast and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Yeah, so my relationship with C.S. Lewis is, I would say, has two lives. So when I was in high school, I read most of his major works, the Mirror Christianity, Chronicles of Narnia, the Screwtape letters, and I loved it. Yeah, at that time in my life, I was struggling with, does God exist, or how does He interact with my life and the life that, or the society I'm living in. And yeah, C.S. Lewis really helped me answer those questions and then pose new ones. And then I put him down for a couple of years. And then there was one day, about 10, 15 years later, I was having a real hard season. And I just got home from work and was laying on my bed and was at my lowest point. Just nothing in the world was interesting to me. I guess it was sort of maybe a mild depression. I just couldn't think of anything else other than laying on that bed, even though laying on that bed was, I guess, abhorrent to me because I felt like I should be doing something, but I had no interest in anything. But then my eye caught the Chronicles of Narnia on my bookshelf, and a fire was lit in me, a spark of interest, and I was thinking that out of the entire world, there was nothing else I wanted to do in that moment other than read The Horse and His Boy, my favorite Chronicle of Narnia. And so I peeled myself off the bed and read that book faster than I think I'd read any book up to that point. Um, and it just gave me a new lease on life. And from there, I was like, you know what, I need to read more Lewis. I was like, this was so refreshing to my soul, and I feel like Lewis has a lot more to help me process and think about. And so started down a road of reading a lot of his stuff, and was like, hey, like I don't know, talk to the world about it or talk to someone about this. And long story short, that led to the podcast that I host, called Mere C.S. Lewis. And that had hosting that podcast at first with my two brothers, and then in this season or this part I've been doing it solo. But it has been such a blessing because it has put me in contact with other people on similar journeys and with a similar affinity for Lewis, and it's been so life giving to compare notes, hear how Lewis has benefited others, and it's just like the Lord in general. His blessings are so unique, and that you never know where they're gonna lead you. So, and just like this, I know you and you joined me on my podcast
I
to
did.
talk about the last battle, which was so good, and in your perspective, since as we had talked about, the Last Battle was my least favorite Narnia, and it is your favorite. And just
Yes.
getting to talk to you gave me a different perspective and a much greater appreciation for the book. And so yeah, so that's me. I guess my Lewis life. In my personal life, I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and have a wife and two great kids. My daughter, she woke me up this morning, and she wanted me to play with her and read with her before the podcast, and it was so hard to peel her off of me
Oh.
to make it here on time. But anyway, yeah, that's a little bit about me, Christina.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm.
I don't know if you shared the story about why you loved the horse and his boy when we did our episode for your podcast together. I remember you saying it was your favorite, and we found it ironic because the horse and his boy was my least favorite and your most favorite, which same with like the reverse with Last Battle being your least favorite and my most favorite of the Chronicles of Narnia. But I don't know if I knew the story of why the horse and his boy was like so resonant for you. So thank you for sharing that because that made me a little emotional. I just am I never cease to be amazed by how God uses the arts and like with a
Mhm,
capital A, literature is part of this wide tapestry of the arts,
mhm,
um, to pull us out of ourselves and look up, I one of the like most fundamental pillars of the work that I do in my business because I teach Christians how to develop their creative writing practice, and
mm,
and that's all rooted in this deep belief that uh, when we worship through creativity, whether that be writing or painting or music or filmmaking, um, it does two things. It reflects the image of God in us because God is
mhm,
creative and we're made in his image, and so we just get to kind of experience that little piece of like bringing on earth as it is in heaven, bringing that heaven to earth as we actually live out a piece of God's image in us. And so there's a personal element of it just being so like refreshing for our own souls, but then there's also an evangelism piece. So like
mm,
we're worshiping God through our creativity, we're experiencing his goodness through our creativity, but then the world is also impacted. And
mhm,
so, the fact that you're laying on your bed with this, deep moment of depression where nothing is taking your interest in this life, and then one person from Northern
decades.
Ireland
Yeah, mhm,
decades prior, his art is speaking through time and space to pull you out of that moment and point you back to God. And like it just really encourages me because it's these reminders for me are like constantly affirming that, oh my gosh, the reason I'm so passionate about the work that I do, both in this podcast and the work that I do teaching my writing course, is all because this is what the impact of this work is. It brings us out of ourselves and helps us see the beauty of God and the glory of God, all because we've chosen to be creative and to engage with other people's creativity. I think it's such a gift.
It is, and it's something I've been thinking a little bit more about recently. That because I love reading old books, and it's sometimes it's amazing to me that this, like for example, I'm reading a Charles Dickens novel, and so he wrote this. Uh, I guess getting close to 200 years, maybe 175 years ago, and what he was doing at his desk in the privacy of his own home or office is resonating throughout the centuries and coming to me in my bedroom, in my bed, and um, as I'm reading it, and yeah, I think that's a unique power that the arts have because the sciences, and I just this is a little bit of a rabbit hole. You might be as a scientist or inventor, you might be designing something, and to its credit, you'll keep iterating on it and keep improving it, but it quickly is much different than the original design or whatever.
Mm,
Um, where yeah, like I said, with arts, like there's a unique power in what is written or created for the most part is what uh resonates, and not just the famous uh ultra hall of fame artists, but even when I read letters from my family from like decades ago, it's crazy
yeah.
that this one little moment that they were having is sort of frozen in time. And yeah, so anyway, that is a pretty cool thing about the arts.
Love it. Okay. Now, I always like to ask guests what their favorite quote is in the letter that we're looking at. I actually
Mm,
want to broaden this question a little bit because you hinted at it already. I
mhm.
not only want to ask what your favorite quote is, but I would love to just ask you like why this is your favorite letter, why you picked this one.
Yeah, so let's see. I'm thinking which angle. I guess I'll go with the quote first, and then I'll
Yeah,
lead into
sure.
the. So I think the quote I'm about to read is it's not the most impactful, but it's the funniest, and it's I think indicative of why I somewhat indicative of why I love the letter. But the quote is from the very end where Lewis is saying, quote, "She's the sort of woman who lives for others. You can always tell the others by their hunted expression." And and so he's like, yeah, being funny, quoting someone who's possibly saying this, and yeah, the whole letter is about quote unselfishness and how people can act or think they're being unselfish, and then when the other person or other people don't realize it or don't quite understand it, then resentment um, builds up. And so, just like that quote, this fictional woman was trying to be unselfish and do and do and do for others, and it actually was overwhelming, and others are not exactly what they needed in the moment. And and I think this letter, what makes it my favorite is that it made a lot of things in my life make sense or come into place. For um I think yeah, later on down in the page of towards the very end, it Lewis also says, quote, "Some surprise that the girl does not always notice just how unselfish he is being," end quote. And I think that is when I realized that, oh, this is what I'm doing. Like I so this letter not saved my marriage, but it really wiped away a lot of resentment that had been building up. And
Wow.
because I realized that, oh wow, like yes, I was doing stuff for my wife um in the name of being unselfish, which is good, but I guess we'll talk about a little bit later about the difference between unselfishness and charity as Lewis defines it. And but anyway, so that made me realize like, oh wow, I'm not really being charitable. And I am expecting my wife to react in certain ways when I do certain things, and she is not. And so I could just, yeah, feel a lot of resentment building up, kind of like a scab. And and so when, yeah, reading that letter made me just sort of reorient my spirit, reorient my thought processes, and it's just been really helpful in knowing how to better communicate what I want, better um work out with my wife what we need to do and stuff. So and yeah, we'll talk. I know we'll dive deeper into all this, but I guess in short, that is why I love this so much. Is it felt like it was a healing balm, or it helped me head off a lot of major potential issues down the road.
When, at what point in your marriage, or let me rephrase that, how long were you married before you engaged with this letter in that way?
Good question. Not too long ago, maybe. So I've been married 8 years, and so I think when I read that letter, it was about maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so about six years of marriage before, yeah, I read that, um and yeah, sort of had that epiphany of sorts, or that like I said, that sort of brushing away or cleaning up of resentment.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I am curious what your thoughts are on this whole idea of unselfishness. And for the benefit of the listener, right? I hope that obviously you've read this letter before listening, but just to kind of give a quick summary, letter 26 is Screwtape looking at how in the early stages of like a courting relationship, Screwtape and Wormwood can sow into this couple, the patient and his partner, this kind of false idea of what unselfishness looks like. And I'm using air quotes, which you can't see, which essentially manifests in resentment because the other person is being quote unquote unselfish for unselfishness' sake. That's a really wordy way of saying it, as opposed to being unselfish for the purpose of charity and actual love for the other person. So it becomes like a competition as to who can outdo each other with being unselfish. But Lewis very cleverly also emphasizes that while this is like a long-term game, while this effect is going to result in a lot of resentment later on down the line, in the early stages of courting, neither the guy or the girl are going to notice that it's happening because they're in the sort of honeymoon phase of their relationship, where like everyone knows, if you've been in a relationship, like there's just to put it bluntly, like you are more sexually excited by the presence of that other person, that it blinds you to a lot of other things.
Mhm.
And so you're just so keen to please them anyway with everything that you do, because you're butterflies and you're in love and all these things, and you just hold their hand and your heart starts racing. And so you just want to do everything to please them. But actually beneath the surface, there's this like, oh, no, 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 the best way to love them is to never express my own desires of things. And then, fast forward 10 years, and all of those butterflies go away, and you're left with
Mhm.
just a sense of like, oh, actually, maybe I do want to be able to express my own desires of like what I want for dinner. But now I'm in this trap of thinking I need to be unselfish. And so that's kind of what this, in a nutshell, what this letter is looking at. But I wondered, Thornton, what your thoughts were on the way that Screwtape describes the difference between a man's definition of quote unquote unselfishness versus a woman's definition of unselfishness, because he effectively says, quote, a woman means unselfishness chiefly, but sorry, a woman by unselfishness uh, I am not quoting this properly. I'm skipping over words here. A woman means by unselfishness chiefly taking trouble for others. A man means not giving trouble to others. There we go. I got it out. Um, and I thought that was a really interesting way of describing it. And I actually got this picture in my head of like if trouble the was it like a materialized thing, a woman's going around trying to literally like take it out of your hand, whereas a man is like, well, there's no trouble here for me to give you. Like my way of helping you is to dematerialize this thing. There's no trouble at all for you to take away from me. And so both are kind of at odds of not being able to enact what they perceive to be the unselfish way of living. And actually, they're just kind of like two ships passing in the night where neither is really understanding or enacting a truly charitable, loving posture towards the other. And I think in my own life, I have seen that stereotypical definition of a man versus a woman's understanding of unselfishness. I have seen that play out, but I also like to challenge stereotypes a little bit and be like, but is that always the case? I don't know. So I'm actually really glad that I got a guy on for this episode because I want these two different perspectives, and I'm really curious if Lewis's definition resonates with you of man versus woman's conception of unselfishness, or if you think it's actually a little bit different.
Yeah, and I'm glad, yeah, to be talking with you about this because I was wondering the same thing because and in my experience, it's the opposite. So in
Okay.
my yeah, and so so it's interesting to hear you say like in general you've seen this play out, but in my life, I'm the woman where I try to take trouble from others. I'm volunteering to do something for someone, or I'm like trying to preemptively say like, oh hey, I see that you need this done, and can I do that for you? And where my wife is she doesn't want to impose, like she doesn't want to overstep her bounds. Like one example from our life is there's someone in our families who's having a baby, and uh, and my thought is, okay, we need to go down there and like help with the cleaning. We need to help um with the things around the house so that the the mom and dad can focus on the child. And where my wife is like, yeah, we need to go down there, but we need to stay as little as possible because they're their own family. They're like coalescing as a family. They don't want other people in the house um like messing things up. They like if us being in the house is just by nature something else they have to worry about. And so it's like you can see both sides of it, of the going down there and helping and taking the stress off, but also how having other people in the house can just be inherently stressful. So it's yeah, and so that's just one example. So yeah, in our marriage, it's yeah, it's the complete opposite where I'm the one who's trying to do things, and my wife is the one trying not to be a burden or impose on others. So yeah, so, like, I'm glad you brought it up because I was, yeah, very interested, like, "Oh, is Lewis just wrong here, or is it kind of, like, in general, and then my experience is sort of the exception or whatever?" So, yeah, that's fascinating,
So
the
interesting.
differences. Mhm.
And do you know what I'm thinking too? I'm wondering if there is a generalization that can be made about different cultures as well. So obviously, Lewis is writing from the culture of being in the United Kingdom. Granted, you know, 50 odd years ago, uh, but still, I'm wondering if because I also live in the United Kingdom, if I am seeing play out the stereotypical way that men and women are kind of programmed feels like too strong of a word, but kind of conditioned to behave and like the
Uh-huh.
way that they're conditioned to enact their role within a relationship dynamic. I'm wondering if it's maybe different in the UK versus the US. But then I also am wondering maybe this is just, like, different people's personalities, the family cultures that they grew up in. Like, I really wonder if maybe your wife just grew up in a family culture where I have no idea, but, like, I could see this being the case
Uh-huh.
with someone where they grew up in a family culture where everyone was taught that the best way to love is to not be a burden. And so, like, maybe both men and women within her family dynamic versus your family dynamic, you know, you were taught the best way to love is to pitch in and help out. Like, I do wonder if this could just vary depending on the family culture you were raised in, let alone the national culture you were raised in, you know?
Yeah, it's a good question, and sometimes I think that these types of questions is like what the benefit of literature is versus like psychology.
Yeah.
Um, because I know sometimes a dig at literature is that it's like pop psychology. Like why read it when you can just kind of read a psychology or sociology study? But I think there's things like this where it's like it's I would imagine it would be very hard to like craft a scientific study to answer this question. And you can do something to approximate it, but I think telling stories, hearing people's lived experiences in a artistic way is maybe the best way to get across it, um, to, like, explore that question, and I don't know, I guess my theory for my wife and my specific relationship, or I guess dispositions is that, like, she is, my wife is very much like her father,
Okay.
and not and there's it's not hard and fast, but her father is very much like that as well, and her mother is more of the let me go and help, um, others and stuff where yeah, and her father is like, I will help if asked, but I'm not going to impose. And in my family, it's, my mom is the let me go and do the thing, and my dad is just the one who's waiting to be asked because he doesn't want to, overstep his burden or
Mm,
overstep his bounds. And so I think to your point, I think in our situation it's family cultures and the parent we took after personality wise.
yeah.
But I think that shows that maybe in general there is like a gender thing, but I think the stronger predictor is yeah, like you're saying, family culture or um the personal personality and stuff. So, yeah, so I think Lewis can maybe be believed in very broad strokes, but certainly not a hard and fast line between the genders when it comes to this.
Well, and we know too that like any generalization is called a generalization because it applies most of the time, but
Yeah,
not all of the time. And
yeah,
obviously, this is a fictional work of literature. It's not trying to be a psychology book. And so I think that gives us the ability to take from it what we need in a way. And in the sense
mm-hmm,
that you were still impacted by this, even though you identified more with Lewis's description of like a woman's conceptualization of unselfishness, that didn't stop you from being
mm-hmm,
able to be like, "Oh, okay, well, I don't think Lewis has got it right here, but I still see the dynamic that he's describing and the impacts of it, and I still am I'm learning a lot from this." So, it's not trying this isn't trying to be anything other than what it is, which is a story that gets us to think.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, despite the identifying with the description of a woman, yeah, like you said, I was like, yeah, it's I can still take the lessons and greatly benefit from it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what's funny too? I'm just thinking about my own marriage, and I think that my husband can be both. My husband's just altruistic, and so I think he
Mm,
tries both to not be a burden, but also really wants to
mhm,
help. So he's a little bit of both. And it
mhm,
depends on the circumstances. So like if it's uh help that needs doing around the house, he'll feel guilty if he's sitting around watching TV, even though my husband works a very like he's got a manual labor job. So there will
mhm,
be times where I'm like, there'll be times where I say, I need your help with this, particularly if it's a
mhm,
job that requires a tall person, because I'm not tall.
mhm,
But then a lot of times I'll be like, okay, but you've been on your feet all day. Like, you're allowed to rest, and I'm going to do this job. And
mhm,
he'll feel guilty not helping. But then also, if it's a different circumstance where it's like, what do you want for dinner? Or what do you want to do this weekend? He will struggle to like say what it is that he wants because he doesn't want to be an
mm,
imposition. So like he can be both. And I think sometimes I can be both. So I
mhm,
definitely appreciate that this is something that we can look at with a much more dynamic understanding in our own personal lives. And regardless of which version of unselfishness we identify with most, it just sort of gives language to our experiences and helps us see, like, Lewis is taking this letter all the way through to here's the ultimate result if we don't properly understand what it truly means to be selfish and unselfish. And if we play on these kind of
Mhm.
paper thin definitions, it results in huge explosive arguments over petty things because we're
Yep.
all playing like it's kind of like play stupid games, win stupid prizes kind of thing, you know?
Is that a phrase in the UK or is that a USism?
Do you know, I don't know. What I do know is that it became a lot more popular out here once it found its way into a Taylor Swift song.
Ah, yep.
So I don't
Very
I
nice.
I remember, a friend of mine quoting that, and she's like, "Oh, Taylor Swift." Like, she thought I was quoting Taylor Swift, and I was like, "No, this was a phrase before Taylor Swift, but I think it made its
Yep.
way over to being a more popular thing in the
I
UK
mean,
'cause of,
it's such a great turn of phrase.
it
I love
really
that.
is. It
Yeah.
it works in so many
Mhm.
contexts, honestly.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to look at Screwtape mentions this tension between the emotional resources dying away while the spiritual resources have not yet grown, and it's when he's talking about
Mhm.
that turn in the relationship where like um sexual excitement dies down and you have to actually get into the nitty-gritty of living with this
Mhm.
person that you're committed to even when the butterflies have gone away. And he talks about this kind of like the apex of the relationship where all of the sudden you realize, "Oh no, all the excitement's gone away. The emotional resources have gone away, but the spiritual resources haven't yet developed." And that's like the
Mhm.
the perfect moment in which Screwtape's ready to strike, you know? And I'll read this quote. I'll try not to botch this one and stumble over my words this time. I believe I underlined it. Let me see. Yeah, I did. So, quote, when once a sort of official, legal, or nominal unselfishness has been established as a rule for the keeping of which their emotional resources have died away and their spiritual resources have not yet grown, the most delightful results follow. And this is the part of the letter where he then moves into how to create those like long lasting tensions that grow over decades as both people are trying to be quote unquote unselfish and actually just not understanding each other at all. And so I just kind of
Mhm.
wondered, like, I thought that how do I even describe it? Like that binary between emotional and spiritual resources, that that concept that one dies but the other is also kind of dead, like the emotional resources have died but the spiritual resources haven't grown to replace it. Like that's a
Mhm.
to me that's a really convicting visual
Yep.
because when you're in any kind of situation, right? This letter's about a relationship, and we all know that like in another letter Lewis talks about the law of undulation, right? And so
Mhm.
when you're in a relationship at the early stages, you're in that like height of passion and love, and then it dips and it undulates. But this concept doesn't just apply to relationships. It can apply to like a new job or like moving to a new place or like anything that
Mhm.
um you have these emotional resources that you're really leaning on in the early stages in order to thrive and survive. But at the same time, if we're not growing our spiritual resources, when the law of undulation plays out and things dip, we're kind of left with no resources with which to uh, live godly lives, really. And so I just wondered, like, in your experience, have you ever identified that tension in your own life where you're like, "Oh no, I don't have the emotional resources to cope with this anymore, but actually I haven't been spending the time diligently developing the spiritual resources, so I'm kind of at an impasse and I don't know what to do." Like, have you ever experienced that? And if so, like, how would you say like we respond as Christians to keep that imbalance from happening where the emotional resources drop and the spiritual resources aren't there to take its place?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So when reading that part, sometimes I wonder what the difference between emotional and spiritual resources are, but the way I understood Lewis in this letter was when he was saying emotional resources, it was sort of the I guess common customs and courtesies or social conventions, and once those have sort of been eroded, or kind of like, I guess, when anyone says, "Oh, I can't deal anymore," or like, I can't
Mm,
even," like, I feel like that is the point at which the quote emotional resources have been eroded. And yeah, the spiritual resources, when he says that, what I am envisioning, or what I am understanding him to mean, is the fruits of the spirit, which
yes.
are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Amen.
And so yeah, and so it's so yeah, I've certainly felt at yeah, when like the I guess, like I said, the common like courtesies have been eroded, and like you say, now I'm sort of relying on the spiritual resources, and in, yeah, different situations, have felt like my spiritual resources have not been, um, up to the task, and so then and I guess in all spiritual resources, you're relying on the Lord, and, in those moments, I guess in some Christian circles, I've heard people be called, EGRs, or extra grace required, um, and so those moments, yeah, you need the spiritual resources. So, I guess the other part of your question was, as Christians, how do we respond to that? And so I think 3 ways. I think there's how do you prepare for it now, um, for, yeah, those times that you need spiritual resources, and I think in the preparation phase, y it's the common Christian practices of prayer and fasting um, and service. So I think doing those common Christian practices help build up your yeah, spiritual muscles.
Mm,
And then in the moment when you're like, "Oh, wow, okay, I have met my match." I think in those moments when I've experienced that, it's the first thing of all is sort of prayer. Like, I guess an example from my life recently is we have a dog, a 14-year-old dog who is who is old, and she is having old dog problems. And at night we'll have a diaper on her, but she'll still find a way to pee all over the house. And so it's, yeah, the as you can imagine, the emotional bank is quickly depleted. And I know most recently when I was very angry and wanted to do something I shouldn't, I just had to stop right then and pray and just ask the Lord to give me patience, and to also give us a solution that is helpful for everyone. Because even though it's just a dog, I do feel kind of like Adam in the garden, that, and maybe this isn't it, maybe this is an exaggeration or something like that, but I just feel like I am responsible for this dog the same way Adam was responsible for all the animals in the garden, and so I don't want to, yeah, do anything brash or any,
yeah.
but it does feel like, okay, this can't keep going on. But anyway, I feel like in those moments you just have to stop and pray, and then also I think another way to help with building your spiritual bank is to, kind of like what Paul says in Galatians, is to share your burden. Like, everyone has their load to carry, but we're also called to share our burdens. And so in my in my life, it's been, yeah, talking to my wife or talking to trusted friends, um, and just asking for them to just, at the very least, just kind of bear witness, um, to what is happening. And I guess some people might call that venting. And then I think the third way in the moment is to, I guess, also just read the word. And I have a theory, I guess, as a theologian yourself, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, but I have a theory that every experience in the Christian life, there is a corresponding psalm for it.
Mm.
Um, so based off that theory, I'm like, okay, what psalm can help me in this, or what proverb? And proverbs are really nice because they're short and quippy, and so is there what proverb can kind of help me in this specific moment? Um, and 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 then the third thing, the future phase, like sort of after the moment has passed, after the freshness of the pain or whatever has passed, try to do, I guess, I think as Christians we should kind of do a postmortem, not kind of let the thing die or kind of forget about it, but kind of, and maybe postmortem is not the right word, but just thinking about, okay, what went wrong? Like, how did I glorify God in that moment? Or how did I live up to what the Lord calls us to do in situations like that? And so trying to think about kind of doing an after action with in prayer or with others about, okay, how did this go? How can I improve? How can I prepare for the next time that I'm tested or put in a trial? And then you just kind of start back in the preparation phase.
Yeah.
So yeah, forgive me if that was long-winded, but I think that would be, in my experience, what has worked well, and um, with the emotional resources to spiritual resources.
No, I don't think that was long at all. I think that was really like practical and applicable. And also, it's interesting, the last thing you said really touches on that whole thing about a postmortem, or almost like the word that's coming to my mind is like an audit, like a self-audit. Um
Yeah, yeah, that's a better word for it, yeah.
but it's actually mentioned in the letter just prior to this, in letter 25. I've got it up in front of me. There's a little quote here, which I actually focus on in my episode 4, letter 25. We were looking at this quote that says, "The enemy loves platitudes. Of a proposed course of action, he wants men, so far as I can see, to ask very simple questions. Is it righteous? Is it prudent? Is it possible?" So I think you're kind of right on the money there, because even though like Screwtape is saying this in a really scathing way, he's not wrong in the sense that sometimes God does just
Mm,
want us to reflect without overcomplicating it and just be like, was that righteous? Was that prudent? Was that, as you described, like, how did this honor the Lord? Um, and then once we do that audit and we come up with our answers, like, take those to God, pray about them, and then don't like ruminate on them, like repent, receive the grace of God, and then like learn from the next time. If you've been enjoying magic like this, and you're someone who generally just enjoys engaging your faith in creative and literary ways, I'm going to humbly invite you to come hang out in my little corner of the internet over on Substack, where I publish essays and poetry, creatively reflecting on the goodness of God both in the Mali seasons and in the high seasons. I share a lot more about my life over there, about the work that I'm doing studying theology at Oxford University, which is Lewis's old stomping grounds, and just a lot of other kind of creative tips and things for those of you who are not just readers but also writers and creatives who just want to connect with God in that creative and literary space. So you can come join me over at christinalynwallace.substack.com. My Substack is called The Battle Cry. And if you become a paid subscriber, you also get access to my private podcast, The Waffler, where I share a lot more behind the scenes stuff about things I'm learning at Oxford, things that God's teaching me at the minute, tips for creative writers, whatever God's really put on my heart at the moment, but also my regular creative writing workshops that I host exclusively for paid subscribers, where we do a creative writing practice that is rooted in the liturgical prayer rhythm of the Celtic saints. And those sessions are called the Wind and Breath sessions, and they're exclusive for my paid subscribers. So there's just a lot of fun stuff that happens over in my little corner of the internet. So if you're liking what you're getting here at Magic Like This, I would invite you to come join me over there. It's christinalynwallace.substack.com/subscribe, and the link will be in the show notes. Hope to see you there.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Yep.
I also wanted to touch on I think it's really interesting that you brought up your dog because my experience, I don't know how much you know about my story, but on Substack, I started to grow and gain a lot of readers mostly by talking about the suffering I was experiencing with our puppy. Um, I
Mm.
don't know if you caught any of that. It's totally fine if you didn't. But I would say for the first year that I was on Substack, all I could write about was the deep grief that we were experiencing because we got this brand new puppy. My husband and I had wanted nothing more than to get a puppy for most of our life together, years and years. And we finally reached a season of life where we were like, okay, we're in a place where we can care for this dog properly. Like I'm working from home now because you can't really get a brand new puppy and just leave it home alone all the time. Um,
Yeah.
and so we got this puppy and we were so excited and then ended up discovering that this poor dog had some really serious health problems, which we got
Mm.
the I mean this dog was well cared for, it wasn't from a puppy farm or anything like that. I did so much
Mhm.
research and we were really intentional to make sure that we were getting a puppy from an ethical place where the dogs were cared for well and treated well. And so this was genuinely just like a luck of the draw. This was like a fluke. We got this gorgeous
Yep.
dog who ended up being really sick, and I don't know if you know this, but dogs with behavioral problems, about, I want to say it's 80% of behavioral problems in dogs actually are rooted to a medical problem. So, dogs that appear to be aggressive, dogs with a lot of anxiety, fear, reactivity, more times than not, there's a medical root. And in our case, we ended up discovering that our dog had really, really severe inflammatory bowel disease, basically. Um,
Mm.
but we didn't know this for the first sort of year and a half of his life, and so we were working with the vets. Thankfully, we had really good pet insurance, but we were working with the vets to try to figure out why is this dog having all these behavioral problems, and also a lot of
Mm.
weird GI problems, and it was heartbreaking for us, and my emotional resources were utterly depleted, and there were times with our poor dog where I was literally screaming like, "I can't do this anymore. Like, I hate this. I hate this."
Yeah.
Um, and there was a few times where I was like, "I don't know. I don't know what we're gonna do here." But I felt similar to you, and I love that you described this like commission that's given to Adam in the garden. Um, I won't speak for anyone else, but I think I definitely was raised in a very subtle theology that I don't even think I was conscious of growing up, but this really subtle theology that because animals aren't made in the image of God like we are, they're not valuable. I don't think I realized that I
Mhm.
learned that because no one told me that outright, but it was kind of a subtle message that I internalized, and I didn't realize it until God forced me to face that with this animal that I deeply, deeply loved. And I realized, like, oh, the cultural response to this dog would be that it's too inconvenient. You just need to put it down. And
Mhm.
I completely understand when animals need to be put down because they are suffering and there's no way to end their suffering. But I was faced with this other motivation for putting a dog down, which is that it was just they were too inconvenient for me. And
Mhm.
there were people asking, like, are you sure you don't want to just put this puppy down? Because, there's a lot of behavioral issues going on here and you're not equipped to deal with them anymore. And I was like, yeah, but we have the resources to actually try to get to the bottom of this dog's medical condition and care for this dog. And I started reading my Bible differently when suddenly I
Mm.
loved this animal so much, and I realized that the love I had for this dog was love that God had imparted to me and was a reflection of how God cares for all of creation. And yes, we are made differently. We are made in the image of God in a way that is different from all the other animals. And yet, God literally gave Adam the task of naming every animal and taking care and intentionality with his creation. And so when my emotional resources completely depleted, I started looking at my Bible differently and experiencing God's love for me differently because of the love that I experienced for my dog, and this desire to like
Mhm.
dig my heels in and do everything I could to care for this dog and help him be restored to health, and also to just honor the rest of God's creation in a way that I never had thought to before. And it's not that I was flippantly, wanting to like set forests on fire, but like I looked at the world
Mm,
with a new sense of wonder and beauty and appreciation that I didn't realize I hadn't been looking at it before. Like I just had this new sense of reverence of all creatures because they were made by God, like this new respect for God by like looking at his creation and realizing like, oh, to honor creation is to honor God. Like to care for this animal because God gave them to me is to care for God's creation and to honor what he has made and what he's given to me. And so there was like this moment where my spiritual resources started. I was definitely like low in the tank on both. My spiritual and emotional resources were both depleted in that season. But at one point, it felt
mhm,
like my spiritual resources started to grow because I realized, okay, God, you gave me this animal to care for and to love and to look after. And in doing so, you are also going to supply me with both the emotional and spiritual resources that I need to be able to do that. Like anything that you're going to ask me to do, you're also going to supply me with the resources to do it if I keep turning to you and looking to you. And he has, like, he's given us friends who have helped us to care for this dog. He's blessed us with a really good insurance policy that means we don't need to worry about the financial resources to care for this dog. And he has granted
mm.
us more patience and more intentionality and like more love and more joy and more self-control. Like he's given us this task, but then he's also through like the helper of the Holy Spirit given us the resources to do it. So I just felt prompted to share that because it was really interesting to me that you went that direction with your own story and giving an example with your own dog. And I can't tell you how much like when my emotional resources were at their absolute bottom and I looked to God for my like renewing of my resources, the things that he threw in whilst resourcing me to care for this dog, like he also threw in just like a new sense of joy and appreciation for creation, and that has a direct impact on me every morning when I wake up. Like I appreciate the world in which God's blessed me to enjoy so much more now after suffering through this season with a really sick dog.
Yeah, and I think just like you, I had yeah, just like you mentioned, that subtle theology that because animals are not made in God's image, that they're, I guess, dirt or like
Yeah.
just maybe that's too harsh, but just and it's funny because Lewis is the one who made me rethink that. I think the Narnia books, in particular, um, like the in the Magician's Nephew when Aslan's creating the world, and Lewis does a very good job of I guess elevating
Yeah.
animals in that part, and then even the Horseness Boy, the whole title, um, just yeah hints at the equality of talking animals with humans, and but I think and just to go down this rabbit hole a little bit more, no pun intended, um, the in Paralandra, I don't know if you've read
That's
that,
actually not one I've read
but
yet, but I'm excited to.
oh yeah, it's incredible. It's actually yeah, I just finished reading Lewis's letters to the children, and he mentioned in one of the letters that "Till We Have Faces" and Paralandra are his favorites.
Okay.
Um, and in Paralandra, that is he makes it abundantly clear his view on what the first humans what their responsibility is to the I guess the lesser creatures or the other creatures that God has made, and so that made me really rethink my yeah relationship with uh, my dog, my pet, but also just creation in general. And so yeah, yeah, Lewis once again is challenging assumptions and I think and bringing life through them.
Yeah. And it's such it to me, like it's been humbling and it forced me to face a theology that I realized was actually really prideful and really selfish, but then actually
Hmm.
in humbling me to that, like, just the love and appreciation that I feel for the gift of creation that God has lavished upon us, like, and I'm not just talking like, I love and enjoy my dog, but also, I always thought that I appreciated, like, a good sunset or, like, a
Mhm,
mountainscape, but I appreciate it even more now because I just feel this, like, quiet sense
mhm,
of, like, all of this is a gift, all of this reflects God's glory, and He's given it to us to care for and to be something that points us back to his goodness and his glory, and it's just really humbling. It's changed the way that I carry myself through the world and also and how I read scripture even. Like, you look at Job, and when God finally speaks up at the end of Job, like, look at how much he talks about how he cares for animals. Like, I think there's even a point where he asks the question, like, "Do you know when the ostrich lays her eggs?" Like, there's this huge monologue within this where he's just talking
yeah.
about the rest of creation other than humanity. And he's kind of just like, look around you. Look around you at how much of this world sings to my glory and how much it matters. And yeah, it's just really beautiful. But I know that was a little side tangent, but I'm glad we went down it. I think that was yeah, I
Yeah.
think that was great. Okay, bringing it back to this particular letter, I wanted to ask this concept of the great conflict illusion that Screwtape alludes to. I'll read the quote to contextualize. It says, later on, you can venture on what may be called the generous conflict illusion. Sorry, not the great conflict illusion. The generous conflict
Mhm.
illusion. This game is best played with more than two players in a family with grown up children, for example. And he goes on to describe this scenario in which basically the whole family gets into this like blazing row over the fact that one family member suggested that they go take tea out in the garden. And another family member's like, well, I'd rather not take tea, but I guess, to make you happy, I will. And then they go back and go, no, 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 don't just sacrifice what you want for our sake. Like, we're not going to let you do that. Like, we're not going to be used for you to self gratify your own conceptions of unselfishness. And it just turns into this like blazing row where they're like, fine, I won't take tea in the garden at all. I just will go without tea. And it's
Yeah.
such an accurate description, though, about how a mountain is made out of a molehill, but actually it's not really a molehill because what's coming out in this blazing row is like years of resentment that neither party is really aware of in how they've been engaging with this simple idea of like generosity, unselfishness, our ability to voice our own needs and desires. Like, oh my goodness, this is something I see talked about a lot from like relationship counselors and stuff like that. Just this ability to articulate what you need and what you want, and that not being demonized as an inherently selfish or bad thing. And like all of these pieces come into play in what Screwtape is describing as the generous conflict illusion. And so I'm just wondering, I think I probably know the answer, but like, have you experienced the generous conflict illusion in your own life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, I would be surprised if no one hasn't. And I think this you probably have not seen this movie, uh, but let me just ask, have you ever heard of or seen the movie called Carnage? It has
No.
Kate Winslet and John C. Reilly. So it's basically the generous conflict illusion for like an hour and a half. Where the premise of the movie is uh Kate, Winslet's character and her husband, um, they're all well-known actors, I'm just blanking on the names, but they go to this other couple's house or apartment, and they're like, "Hey, we heard that your son was bullying our son, and, we just wanted to talk to you about it," and so that's the premise of it, but it's all about them trying to be nice, but not exactly say what they wanted, and then the other couple, like, trying to be understanding, but not saying what they actually want, and then they're both trying to it's just the generous conflict. They're trying to be polite, but, be polite for altruistic sake, and it's a comedy of manners, and
Okay.
it's but it's so painful at times, that you're like, "Just come out, just say what you want. We everyone knows all the characters know, everyone watching the movie knows, like everyone knows what each other wants, but they're dancing around it. They're trying to be unselfish, but but in the way Lewis is saying it, unselfish in a prideful way, and not being charitable. So anyway, I think if anyone really wants to laugh at this, or I don't know, dissect this, then I would recommend that movie. But also in the movie, it slowly descends into like a shouting match. Um, and at the very end, I won't spoil it, but it's just exactly what Lewis said. It just completely blows up, and like the movie's called Carnage for a reason. It's not a horror film, but it's just social carnage. Um, but yeah, and I think it is inherently farcical and ironic that these people who are wanting to be unselfish, um, are I guess indirectly trying to angle for what they want, whether it's petty altruism or something else. And what I have tried to, in my own personal life, do is, I guess, two things. Um, One is be very clear about what I want. And Lewis, I forget where he says this, but he says elsewhere, just like the perfect man would know what he wants, and not say anything more than that, and also nothing less than. Like I said, that's a very rough paraphrase, but that, I guess, in my life, I'm like, okay, like this is what I would like, and not trying to sell it too much or pump it up too much, but also not like sell myself short. Like if I'm in a group and we're trying to decide what to do for dessert, I might say, "Hey, I would like some ice cream." But if if the group wants to go get cupcakes, and then it's like, okay, I just hold it I try to hold it very loosely.
Yeah.
Like if uh if we're not going to get ice cream, that is completely all right. But I'm not going to what I guess I'm not going to do is, I guess, necessarily advocate for cupcakes if what I actually want is ice cream,
Mm,
because as Lewis points out, that leads to resentment. But yeah, like if the group wants cupcakes, then okay, that's what we're doing. Um, yeah, so I think the generous conflict illusion is certainly a thing in everyone's life, and I think Lewis does a good job of of using his example as a family, because one, I think that opens up people's eyes to that this unselfishness slash charity thing is not just a married couple thing; it's just a human relationship thing.
yes.
Um, but anyway, yeah, I did. Have you experienced it in your life, Christina?
Gosh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
I think one of the other
Yeah.
things that is really worth kind of zoning in on here is, you mentioned, okay, so a decent way to do this is to voice that I want ice cream, but then hold it loosely. And I think we can get stuck in a trap when we actually tell ourselves a story about what unselfishness means that is so far off the mark that we create resentment before the other person has even had an opportunity to enter that dialogue of that story. And it manifests in effectively,
Mhm.
we don't even voice what we want at all because we've told ourselves that
Yeah.
we can't. We tell ourselves this whole story about how to truly be unselfish. We can't even voice what we want. And then without realizing it or
Mhm.
not, we're reinforcing another subliminal story that is like, well, the other person wouldn't listen anyway. Or like I am obliged to not make my desires known to honor that person. And then that person becomes the icon of our resentment because we've created a whole story about them that they haven't even been able to participate in. um, and what we've
Yep.
told ourselves about what it means to be unselfish. So, yeah, I mean, and I think the classic one, and I know there's going to be someone listening to this that's going to be nodding their head as I say this, but what do you want for dinner? That question. What do you want for
Mm.
dinner?
Mhm.
And, like, people sometimes genuinely, it's just like, we don't know. We don't know what we want for dinner. But other times it's like, oh, well, whatever you want. Or like, what do you want to do this weekend? Like weekend plans or, whatever the case may
Mhm.
be. Like it's usually things that seem relatively trivial, but actually hold up a mirror to a much deeper relationship that we have with our own sense of agency. And I think the only thing in this that I would truly challenge, well, maybe Lewis or just Screwtape on, is there's a part in here, and I don't have it underlined, so I'm not sure. Oh no, I lie. I do have it underlined. Where it says a little real selfishness on your patient's part is often of less value in the long run for securing his soul than the first beginnings of that elaborate and self-conscious unselfishness. And I just think if, I mean, we need to define our terms here, but if selfishness
Yeah.
just means stating what you want or your desire, I don't actually think that's selfish. Now, it's selfish if you bulldoze and you do whatever you have to get what you
Yeah.
want, but I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I would like ice cream, not cupcakes. Like, that's not selfish to me.
Yeah.
And to believe that is to believe that to be a person with desire is somehow inherently sinful. I know that that's like a big jump, but
Mm.
I think that's a jump that we get to often, where we tell ourselves that to desire anything is to be selfish, and selfishness is a sin, so therefore it's a sin to desire. And I am saying this from personal experience. This is probably my most potent memory of constantly being in the generous conflict delusion. It extends far past just experiencing like really petty blow ups in my relationships, but also it's manifested as like a much deeper, almost depression, in that I feel like to express my
Mm.
desire is to be selfish and therefore sinful. That was a theology that I used to live in without being able to put words to it. I no longer live in that theology, and I realize that God gives us our desires, and in so many ways, not all the time. Sometimes we have selfish desires or sinful desires, but like desire in and of itself as a concept is not sinful. You know, to desire a spouse, a partner, Adam desired that, you know, and God said it is not good for man to be alone. That desire, he didn't, so well, that's really selfish of you, Adam, for wanting a wife. Like, he didn't say that, you know. And so I think that this really touches to a whole like deeper level of our theology of desire. And I think that has to go hand in hand as we dissect our own understanding of what selfishness versus unselfishness means. I don't think we can define unselfishness appropriately until we define selfishness appropriately. And if we are misdefining selfishness as the simple act of stating our desires, then yeah, we're going to end up in resentful relationships with our spouses and our loved ones and our friends because we're telling ourselves a lie, which is that like the things we want in life don't matter and it's selfish to think that they do. That tells us a bigger story too about how God cares about our desires too. Like to think that God just doesn't care if we were, I don't know. I'll give you an example. Like one of the biggest desires of my heart was to do work that allowed me to be creative and glorify God through my creativity. And I thought that was selfish until God literally put
Mm.
person after person in my life, strangers, like prophetic strangers, and I'd never experienced a stranger speaking a word of prophecy over me ever until I reached this like rock bottom where I thought it was selfish to want to glorify God with my creativity as part of my work. And then I had 3 different strangers come up to me and say, "I think God wants you to actually engage your creativity again. And there's a dark cloud over you because you're
Mm.
telling yourself that you can't." That was more or less the paraphrase
Mm.
of a prophetic word that was spoken over me by 3 unrelated people who I did not know, who did not know my story. And
Wow.
that kickstarted my journey on completely dissecting that part of my theology and realizing like, oh my gosh, like obviously what God wants most is for me to desire him, but actually my desire to live a creative life in my work was desiring him. I wanted to worship God with my creativity, and this was an expression of that, but I thought that because it was my desire and because it was going to give me joy, that it was somehow selfish. So like I know I've just gone down my own little rabbit hole here, but like I feel really passionate about this because I think that what Lewis is talking about here in letter 26 is just one example of a deeper story that we tell ourselves when we believe that any desire we hold is inherently selfish or sinful. Um, Obviously, that can be the case. Very, very much so. We can be selfish and sinful and indulge desires that are not glorifying to God or honoring to our loved ones. But desire in and of itself, in its like pure form, is something that God gives us, because that scripture that says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart, implies that there are desires that are good that he wants to fulfill when we are rooted in him and longing for him.
Yep. Mm,
Sorry, I just got off
that's
on
good,
one there.
Christina.
I got so fired up.
Yeah, you're feeling the spirit. That's good.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed this, Thornton. I got one final question for you, and then I will let you go on with your day. But I just wondered if you had any practical advice. You shared that this was a really helpful letter for your marriage. And I just wondered if you had any practical advice specifically for people in relationships, whether it be with a friend or with a spouse, where if you find that you've ended up in this generous conflict delusion and you've always struggled to, you know, enact a true version of selflessness rather than unselfishness, and you want to backtrack now. Like you said that this letter was a real turning point for you about 2 years ago in your marriage. And I just wondered, like, after reading this, like, what were some steps that you took to actually help heal that part of your relationship with your wife, and what might someone else be able to do and take away from this to heal those kind of rifts?
Yeah, I think for me, just being aware of the dynamic was the most helpful thing. Um, that I think I said earlier in the episode that like just things kind of fell into place or made sense after reading this letter. And so just being aware that, oh, like I thought I was being unselfish, but actually after reading Lewis and further reflection, I'm actually being ironically, I guess, prideful, or like I'm feeling this resentment build up because I'm doing what is unselfish, and I'm not getting the credit for it, or it's not leading my wife to be unselfish. And it's like, well, that's not true unselfishness, or that's not, as Lewis says, that's not charity. Um,
Mm,
and then so I think that that's maybe the second part of it is that in this letter, Lewis draws a line between unselfishness and charity, where un I think in everyday conversation people can correctly use unselfishness, but in this letter he's saying that unselfishness is the, I guess, you're doing something out of, I guess, politeness or petty altruism or something. And but what the Lord calls us to actually is charity, where you're doing something out of love, and
yes.
love doesn't keep score, in that whole First Corinthians 13 chapter. So I think those were maybe the two things of just being aware of the dynamic, and what I'm actually what's actually going on, and then actually chasing after charity. And then I think thirdly, as we were just talking about, just stating what you actually want, but holding it loosely, and just putting it out there so that you can have a conversation about like maybe there's a compromise, or maybe there's a third best way that neither of you have thought about, um or yeah, maybe it's you just need to be charitable and for whatever reason lay down what you want to
Yep.
let someone else enjoy it. And so I think so nothing revolutionary, but that is I think what has helped my marriage and just general relationships. And what I would encourage others to do is just be aware of the dynamic, um and just say what you want, hold it loosely, and chase after charity rather than quote unselfishness.
I love that. Well, Thornton, thank you so much for joining me to chat about Letter 26. Where can people find your podcast?
Yeah, so we're on all the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast. You can search Mere C.S. Lewis. We're also on Instagram and Twitter if you want to follow me on there. And then yeah, if you want to reach out to me directly, merecsLewis@gmail.com. So yeah, I appreciate. I'm going through the Chronicles of Narnia now, and I think similar to you, I've had some other life things going on, and so haven't been quite as consistent. But I'm about to release the rest of the Narnia episodes as well as Till We Have Faces.
Thornton, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for sharing where people can listen to your podcast. I'll make sure to put all of that information in the show notes if anyone wants to go and listen to Thornton's podcast, Mere C.S. Lewis. But thank you for having this conversation with me. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
I know. I look forward to it too, Christina.
Thank you again to my buddy Thornton for joining me for that episode. I really hope that it blessed you guys. As always, I'm going to end this episode with a psalm, but just a reminder one more time, you can find Thornton over on his C.S. Lewis podcast, Mere C.S. Lewis. Now then, we're going to be closing today with Psalm 112. And I want you, as I'm reading this, to think about when the wicked is mentioned, the wicked person, or just, the word wicked here is used as a noun in this psalm. I want you to picture it as Screwtape. I want you to be thinking of this psalm as though it is the antidote to Screwtape's schemes. It just feels like a fun little way to approach the psalms in this context. Okay, so Psalm 112. Praise the Lord. Blessed are those who fear the Lord and find great delight in his commands. Their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches are in their houses, and their righteousness endures forever. Even in darkness, light dawns for the upright. For those who are gracious and compassionate and righteous, good will come to those who are generous and lend freely, who conduct their affairs with justice. Surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Their hearts are secure. They will have no fear. In the end, they will look in triumph on their foes. They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. Their horn will be lifted high in honor. The wicked will see and be vexed. They will gnash their teeth and waste away. The longings of the wicked will come to nothing. What a victory song, eh? All right, friends, we'll catch up again soon. Take care.